Welcome back to another episode of the Corner Office here. It's good to be back. I mean, we've been off for a little bit. We've both been on break. I just got back to school. I've been running 2-a-days. It's kind of been hard to get in the studio, but a lot has happened in the NFL and the NBA, so we're ready to give you a massive update as to what's going on today and what we're going to be talking about.
Massive update. Yeah, I can't say the same for me. You've been running 2-a-days and you're already back in school, and I have done nothing but sit on my ass for the last 2 weeks. But that's kind of what college break is all about. So
Yeah.
We're coming off a big week in the NFL. We're getting down the stretch here, looking towards playoffs. And I think that we've kind of seen the brackets be set for both sides for the most part, but the sides that haven't been set are particularly interesting this year. So
I agree.
Let's just jump right in. Before we get too deep here, the AFC has the Chiefs in the 1 seed, Bills in the 2, Ravens and Steelers are fighting for the 3, and the Texans in the 4.
Yeah.
The Chargers have already locked up a wild card spot.
Correct.
And the remainder between the Ravens and the Steelers will have the other, which leaves one spot left that is highly contested going into Week 18 between the Broncos, Bengals, and Dolphins. Alex, which one of those 3 teams do you think will make it in, and why?
Okay, so for starters, I think that we're going to talk about the Colts a little bit later, but obviously they eliminated themselves last week, which was one of the big storylines going into this weekend. I think the NFL wants the Bengals to win. That would be my take on this. I mean, they obviously beat the Broncos last week in a shootout, and I mean, honestly, I think the Broncos did more to lose that game than the Bengals did to win it. I mean, they had multiple opportunities. Bengals miss a field goal to ice the game, give them the ball back. Bo Nix throws the game-sealing pick. Like, it's unfortunate that they couldn't get it done, but they had more than enough opportunities to do so.
Absolutely, but with that being said, it was a candidate for Game of the Year, possibly
Correct.
Game of the Year.
It was a really, really good game. And coming down the stretch here, I mean, you're looking at a Bengals team that's going to have to play a Steelers team that wants to win. You know what I mean? Like, they're trying to fight for this 1 seed, so they're not going to be benching starters. And as much as the Steelers team has seen a late season skid, as they almost always do in our lifetime, they are still a dangerous team at the top of this division. So for that reason, I'm going to be taking the Broncos here. I think they beat the Chiefs for 2 reasons. Number one, obviously the Chiefs have already locked up the 1 seed. There's no reason to play anybody, you know. And number two, I just think that I just think that they have enough firepower to get over the hump if even if they're playing a division rival. And I really don't think you're going to see Mahomes, Kelsey, or any of the boys that you would expect to see in this game.
Which brings up a huge headline, being the fate of the AFC playoff picture lies in the hands of Carson Wentz. If Carson Wentz plays,
it's not something I thought I would ever hear in my life.
Certainly not. But if Carson Wentz goes out and beats the Broncos this weekend.
Yep.
I think the Bengals give the Steelers a serious game, especially the way that they're playing right now. They are a team whose defense is very bad, but the Steelers' offense is unwatchable.
Yep.
And the Bengals are almost a guaranteed score on every possession. So if Carson Wentz can get this game done, the Bengals have a serious chance. I mean, granted, they're going into Pittsburgh, but they have a serious chance of winning this game. And I think that if you're the Chiefs, it makes all too much sense to try and lose this game almost. Like, you would think that they're almost throwing this game because the Bengals are one team that they know can beat them in the playoffs.
I agree. I think that everybody in the AFC, you don't want to see the Bengals. I think that's the one team that is on the bubble right now. I mean, the Dolphins are the third team. They need a lot to go right for them to get into the playoffs at this point. And who do they play? Somebody, division rival, Jets. I think they play the Jets. And
they're a team that
I win.
I just don't want to see them in the playoffs.
No,
at all.
But they also are Mike McDaniel's something like 1-18 against opponents above 500. Like, I just don't see them. They obviously don't have the resume this year, and I don't think they're a playoff team. I do think that the Jets will play some starters in this game because they're just trying to save face. And obviously, your draft pick is pretty much locked up. You're going to be in the top 10 if you're the New York Jets. We'll get to that a little bit later.
But the Dolphins are also, Tua may not play. Yeah. Jalen Waddle is definitely not playing.
Right.
And without Tua, this offense is completely stagnant.
Correct. And we saw that earlier in the season when they were losing a lot of games. It was, I think, because of that. And I think that they could have potentially been more of a threat in the wild card if they had all their pieces for the entire season. But nonetheless, I think that if you're in the AFC right now, because that would be the 6-seeded wild card Bengals would be playing the Chargers?
No, they would be playing the If they're the
Bills.
6th seed, they would be playing the Bills.
The
That would be a
Bills.
great game.
That's a dangerous game. That's
it's a
very,
very exciting game. And I think that if you're talking about this Bengals team, an obvious question that you have to come up with is they have arguably is like Joe Burrow is leading the league in pass yards per game, pass yards as a whole, and touchdowns with 4,600 passing yards and 42 passing touchdowns. So that is an MVP caliber season if their team has more than 10 wins.
Okay. I was about to ask. I was going to say, if Joe Burrow gets his team to the playoffs, do you think he's the MVP of the league?
I think I'd have a hard time saying yes just because of how good Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have been.
Yep.
But at the same time, A, it's something I want to see.
Yep.
And B, from a purely statistical perspective, if you put him up next to those two guys, obviously he's not the same dual threat with his legs as the other two. But from a quarterback perspective, this is an MVP caliber season in any probably other year. And I think that you could make a legitimate argument for Jamar Chase having an Offensive Player of the Year campaign. Obviously, there's guys like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry that are playing, just out of their minds this season. Mm-hmm. But if the question is, if the Bengals make the playoffs, do I think Joe Burrow will win? No. Would I like to see it happen? Yes.
Okay. I think if they get in, he wins the MVP, and I think if they don't get in, there's no argument for it. Because I think that as much as the MVP is a individual award, there has to be some commitment to the idea of like the idea that whatever season you had, like it created wins. You know what I mean? Like it was
and this is a bit of an anomaly because typically when you see quarterbacks have seasons like this, they are going into the playoffs as the 1 seed, the 2 seed, as like a legitimate playoff threat. Well, if this team gets in, which is a huge if, they will have limped their way into the playoffs.
Correct. And the only 2 other quarterbacks to have a season on caliber with this season are Tom Brady when they went 16-0, and Aaron Rodgers when they went to the NFC Championship. You know what I mean? So
and I believe Peyton Manning when they in 2013 when he set the passing touchdown record.
Okay. So obviously those guys are going to win the MVP award because your teams were dominant. You know what I mean? And I get that. I get the whole individual award thing. I really do. But I think that if you are an MVP candidate, you have to be indicative of winning football games. And I just don't think that they've been able to do that. And I also think that the Bengals look at this season. First and foremost, another candidate for Game of the Year came 3 weeks ago when the Steelers played the Bengals the first time. It was an absolute shootout. I don't know if we see that again just because the Steelers haven't looked really the same offensively since this game happened. And the Bengals have obviously continued their production. But I think if you're the Bengals, you look back on that week 1 loss to the New England Patriots, a team that is clearly worse than you, a team that you should have been able to score at least 3 touchdowns against, despite how well their defense was playing at that time. And you go, that one we really want back. You know what I mean?
They shot themselves in the foot from the get-go.
Yep.
Hopefully we'll see them sneak in. We've definitely got an interesting week in the AFC coming up. You mentioned the Dolphins-Jets game earlier. I think you're right. I think the Jets will play some of their starters. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is one of them. I think we may have seen his last game in the NFL against the Bills. I don't necessarily see him coming back. And I think you look at these last 2 years and you say, Jets leveraged the farm, completely leveraged their future to go out and get a past MVP in Aaron Rodgers. They went and traded for his number 1 guy, Devontae Adams. Obviously, they have young guys like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall who are good, but are not unless they have a good quarterback. And I think you look at this team with a 4-12 record and you ask, are they Are they up there with the most disappointing teams in the history of the NFL?
I think you have to say yes. I really do, because I think that a lot of the discourse coming into this season was that the Jets were going to be one of those teams. Like, you look at it, you obviously have a former MVP in Aaron Rodgers coming in. Yes, he's 40 years old. Yes, he's coming off an ACL tear. I get it, right? But I think a lot of fans, especially like the Jets fans in particular, they were rallying behind Rodgers because they were like, this is a guy that we've seen win in other places. You know what I mean?
With the same guys.
Correct. Devontae Adams was supposed to be a top 10 receiver this year.
And Allen Lazard.
Another one of his guys from Green Bay that came over with him. Breece Hall was supposed to be, he was drafted in the first round of every single fantasy draft.
He was the number 3 pick in fantasy this year.
Which is insane to me considering the production that he put up this year. Everything that could have went wrong for this New York Jets team kind of did. I mean, everybody was talking last year about Sauce Gardner, his production at cornerback, the way that this Jets defense looked under Robert Saleh. And I honestly think that firing is what set this entire thing in motion. I think that the midseason firing of a head coach, despite the fact that you were losing a few games, you were very competitive against a lot of teams, and your record wasn't nearly as bad as it is right now. You were defensively sound and you couldn't figure out the offense, and you decided to fire the head coach that pretty much brought the one thing that your team was doing super well.
And we said it at the time. It made no sense at the time.
I know. So I think that you kind of have to look at this Jets team and like, yes, it's the New York Jets. Everybody thinks that the New York Jets are a team that will never be good again just because it's like the Jets are going to jet. Like that's a saying, you know what I mean? But to be honest with you, like despite all of that, despite what people in the media will say and all this type of thing, like this is one of the most disappointing seasons I've ever seen. And I honestly think that this is harming the legacy of one of the greatest players that we've ever seen.
I absolutely agree. And I think that the one reason why you could maybe say otherwise is because most historic quarterbacks go off and do something similar. I think that the two exceptions are Joe Montana and Tom Brady, who you went to the Chiefs
and Manning.
And Peyton Manning. Well, Peyton Manning was kind of different.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, okay.
But those two guys went to another team at the end of their career and were like almost equally as successful. Right. So, I mean, when it comes to most quarterbacks, you do see this, but I would agree with you. Most quarterbacks don't go down in a ball of flames like this. I mean, when people talk about completely disappointing an entire franchise in the span of 2 years, the New York Jets come up in that conversation, and it is largely, in my opinion, part due to their quarterback play. I just don't think he's been very good this year.
I would have to agree with you, which is disappointing because I do think that you thought that this team was going to be better, and despite all of the other things, all the coaching staff, all the this, the that, the uncertainty that's floating around with the Jets right now, it seems like the locker room, the chemistry of this team is just not meshing anymore.
And I think it begs the obvious question of, I mean, we really have no idea if Aaron Rodgers is coming back next year.
No.
And if he doesn't, which I don't think he will, what happens to all the guys that they brought in to play for them?
Correct.
Do they just walk? And now the Jets leverage their farm for 10 years of nothing?
And have no picks.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and let's set the record straight. Like the only person who's going to know if Aaron Rodgers is coming back to football after the season is over is his shaman. But we'll know in the next couple of weeks, I think, you know, as to whether or not he decides to hang up the cleats. I think he should. I really do. I don't think you have anything left to prove if you're Aaron Rodgers. This is clearly not a Super Bowl capable team. You know, there's clearly not Super Bowl level coaching on this team.
I mean, they're still 4 to 5 years away if they were to keep this entire core around.
And there's like, if for a guy like that, you're 41 years old, there's no reason to keep playing football aside from the fact that you love playing football. Like, I get that. But like, if you're looking to win a championship, like you're not doing it in New York in the next 5 to 10 years.
Agreed. You mentioned picks and how the Jets have none of them. We talk so much down the stretch of the season about the playoff picture, which obviously we should. But almost equally as interesting is the draft order, which is going to be decided after this week, certainly for us as Patriots fans. And looking at the New York Giants, going out and having a great game against the Colts and winning makes no sense.
No sense.
You go from the number 1 position to number 4, you drop out of quarterback contention.
So not only do you win the game, and credit to Drew Lock. You know, I don't know why I always root for Drew Lock whenever I see him play. It's weird. But like, I kind of think that he's kind of got some juice, you know, and he does.
He's fun to watch for sure.
He does the whole thing, which I think is kind of tough. So like there's a lot about Drew Lock that I do like, but like I think from a Giants perspective, there is no reason why you should be trying to win football games. You like you just mentioned, like the 2 quarterbacks are Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. Those are the 2 guys.
The 2. There's no more.
Pretty weak class. Like this class isn't supposed to be spectacular. And what is the one position that you're looking at if you're a New York Giants fan? You're like, oh my God, like this is what we need. It's a quarterback. You know, and you had 2 opportunities to get that. Obviously, you're staring down the gun now of will Cleveland take a quarterback, which I think is a question mark.
Well, they've committed to Watson for next season.
Correct. So Tennessee's obviously going to take one.
But in projections, they are still projected to take one.
Interesting. But I think the decision will be made for the Giants as to who they can get. But taking yourself from the number 1 pick to the number 4 pick is just, it makes no sense. You know what I mean? And where was this fire against like, division rivals? You know what I mean? Like I don't get it. You can lose a game, I mean, you lose a game by 23 points to the Bucks. You lose a game by this much, that much, the other thing. Like maybe Dayball's trying to make sure that he doesn't get fired, and that's why they play their starters. Obviously, the guys on the roster want to win. Like I get that. Like nobody like really wants to tank, especially if you're Malik Neighbors having 1,000-yard season as a rookie. Shout out Malik Neighbors for doing that with no quarterback play.
And having missed a bunch of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean he's been a stud, and honestly, I think that like people were mad on the Giants side for not drafting a quarterback last year, and doing the same thing of just like winning a game really randomly and then like shooting their draft projection out of the way. But I think you lucked out getting a guy like Malik Neighbors. But that being said, like there is no excuse for this. There is
absolutely
no
not. And I think that right now, if you're a Patriots fan and you're going against Buffalo, who's going to have, I think Josh Allen will start because he's holding like the all-time record for most consecutive starts.
Yeah.
But we're going to be playing Mitchell Trubisky for the majority of that game. As a Patriots fan, there's not a single part of me that wants to win. Not a single part.
No. That being said, I don't know who we draft. I have no idea.
I think it depends, right? Because, so, I mean, we talked before the show began about will the Patriots trade down? And I think it depends on what the offer is. So if you are I think the only case where the Patriots trade down is where they know that they can still get Travis Hunter and not and give it up to a team that needs a quarterback, right? So like maybe the New York Giants, right? Like let's say the Giants slide into the 3 and they want to get up to 1 to take the quarterback that they want.
Yep.
And we slide down to 3. 2 quarterbacks go off the board, and then we still get Travis Hunter and something else great from it. I think that's the ideal scenario because really we don't need the number 1 pick.
I agree.
We need Travis Hunter.
There are also no division rivals in the top 5 for us right now. Like nobody that we could trade with 1 through 5 is going to be like, oh, we can screw over the Patriots right now. You know what I mean? Like relatively, and I do think that Travis Hunter is the guy to get at that high of draft pick. I still don't know what position he's going to play in the NFL.
I don't think it matters.
I don't either. I think you obviously take the best player on the board, right? But I also think that the conversation about the Patriots for the past however many weeks has been 1, will the coaching staff have some turnover? And 2, what do you do about the offensive line? And I think the only way to build the offensive line is through the draft. And now, I'm a guy who's always like, oh my God, we need to draft a skill player. We need to draft a receiver, which has also been a weak point for the Patriots. And then we take somebody like Cole Strange, like 3 rounds over what we were supposed to, because that's just how the Patriots used to draft. But I'm telling you that I want offensive linemen in the draft. You know what I mean?
But not with our first pick, not with our first round pick.
If you take whoever the offensive tackle is from Western Michigan with the number 1 overall pick, I will be very upset.
I might not be a fan. I might stop watching football.
But I don't think that's going to happen.
I think for the Patriots, it has to be Travis Hunter, and you have to get compensation from it, which may look like an offensive lineman or an offensive lineman pick. But the 2 things that are the worst in the NFL for us right now are our wide receiver room and our offensive linemen. And those are both things that I agree have to be addressed in this draft, because where else are you going to address them? Obviously, big name free agents are on the board. The Patriots have shown that they haven't wanted to spend. They don't want to spend. So if they're not going to do that, they have to build through the draft. I think Travis Hunter is the obvious number 1. And then from there, I agree. You have to build through the draft, which we've done a fairly good job of in years past, not last year. Okay. The other thing that you mentioned, Patriots coaching staff. This is a point of contention between you and I. We disagree on it. People are calling for Gerard Mayo's job. In the NFL, you get 3 years, especially in a rebuilding phase.
Right.
Gerard Mayo's in his first year. I actually really, really like his mindset when it comes towards developing players. He's a guy who says it doesn't matter what stage of the game we're in, how much we're losing, as long as these guys are getting reps and getting better. And I think you've seen that with guys that you know are going to stick around, like Drake May. He's gotten considerably better throughout the year, regardless of how bad we are. So I think that calling for his job is pointless and foolish, to be honest with you. I don't understand why you would ever do that. I think that next season we need to see at least a sign of a direction. And then year 3 is where you make the decision as to whether or not he's the guy. But until then, it's just premature to call for his job.
All right. I think the argument if you want to hear what it is. I don't really necessarily agree with it. I don't think that Gerard Mayo has done anything this season that has warranted people being so up in arms about him. Like, the Patriots were going to be bad. They weren't projected to win a single game. They weren't favorites in any game coming into the season. You know what I mean? Which I think is a little bit absurd, but also like it's warranted to think that this team was going to be awful. I think that you made the right draft pick with Drake May, hand up. I was a huge hater of the pick. I really wanted Marvin Harrison Jr., who I do think is going to be really good, but it does seem like they got something here. You know what I mean? There is potential here. There is something to build with. But the argument against Gerard Mayo is what was the one thing last season that the Patriots did much better than they do this season?
Defense.
And the defensive regression that you have seen over the course of the season, as well as what Gerard Mayo has said about players in the media and about the team overall in the media, are things that people are uncomfortable with.
People outside of the locker room, though,
Correct.
which I think it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter. That's the argument, though, is that
right. So you are playing devil's advocate, but I think that if you look at the defensive regression, you're missing huge guys from last year. Jabril Peppers going out for personal reasons. Huge guy from last year. Obviously, Christian Barmore on our defensive line being out with blood clots. There's nothing you can do about that. Trading Mac Wilson to the Cardinals was not his decision. Right. So you're missing key guys from last year. Obviously, Christian Gonzalez is out again with a concussion. So I think that there's a lot of things that you could point to that have to do with Gerard Mayo, but for the most part, I think he's kind of doing the best with the pieces that we have. And that becomes more of a front office discussion. So if you're the New England Patriots, at what point does your leash run out with the people who are making the front office decisions?
Yep.
Which I think should be addressed before the head coaching.
Okay. I just think people look at the landscape of the NFL and they go, oh my goodness, like Mike Rabel is still available. He's an expat. Like, that's a guy that we should get, and I get it, right? Like, he was very successful with the Titans, but I don't see any reason as to why Gerard Mayo has failed in his position aside from his inexperience.
But and very successful with the Titans, right? Like, you had AJ Brown and Derrick Henry on the same team, and you didn't even. You went to a conference went to a conference semifinal.
Yeah, something like that.
Like, that's not really that's relative success compared to what we have, but
quarterback. But yeah,
I mean, it's relative success compared to what the Patriots are considering success right now. But at the same time, like, he didn't win anything as a coach.
Right. I don't necessarily disagree, but I also think that, like, the idea of getting a guy with some NFL experience in the locker room in a coordinator position is not an awful idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get him
first-year coordinators,
if you can get him as a defensive coordinator over, I don't know the guy's name that we have right now, but I know he hasn't been particularly good. I mean, I think that you would do that, but I don't think Mike Vrabel's in the NFL to be a defensive coordinator right now.
Okay.
Moving on to the NFL or NBA, I'm sorry. It's been hectic, I would say, in the NBA. I mean, we're totally in this period where no one really cares. Players don't care. Coaches don't care.
Ratings
Fans
are down.
Really don't care. Ratings are bad.
Can we address the ratings for a second, though, before we go any further? Because I've been seeing this rhetoric a lot, like, around recently, and I do think it's a problem what the NBA has been doing. But I don't think ratings are down because of basketball, which is, like, something that I've heard a lot about is the fact that, oh my goodness, teams are shooting more threes. Like, I get it, right? Not everybody wants to watch high-level basketball where people are shooting threes more. That's why college basketball is so popular, because people get downhill in the lane and they do things. But statistically, it makes more sense to shoot outside shots, so more teams are doing so. I get that. The reason ratings are down is because you're selling teams and games to online streaming services, and people just cannot keep up with it. It's impossible. It makes no sense.
It's so expensive. 100%.
Like, you can't watch games live unless you have full cable packages. You can't watch games on every streaming service, like, because it makes no sense. So obviously, yeah, your ratings are going to be down because you've kind of sold out to a bunch of companies. You know what I mean?
If you wanted to watch every NBA game this season, it would cost something ridiculous like $600.
Which is nuts. Which is not. But I also think it's unfair to be like, oh my goodness, the ratings are down because of the players. No, the ratings are down because of the league. The league's choices have brought you to this point. You know what I mean? Like, they wanted to sell their rights from TNT to Amazon Prime. Guess what? You need an Amazon Prime subscription to watch games now. It's dumb. I don't like it. But that's what the reality of watching the NBA is nowadays. Unless your team is on primetime television, being one of the top 2 seeds in their league who are always going to be on those types of games, you're not going to be able to see them. And obviously your ratings are going to be down because of that.
That's absolutely correct. And I do think that that's true. I think that a lot of casual viewers don't quite understand that, because they are not people who are like, let me tune in to see what the Spurs are doing against the Timberwolves on a Sunday. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you have to be a dedicated NBA fan to understand the frustration of being like, I can't watch this game. I think that the NBA tried to save face from a numerical perspective by putting out these numbers that they had, like boosted percentages from the Christmas Day games that they had last year. It was like, the 1 o'clock game had like a 25% increase, and the 4 o'clock game had like a X increase, right?
LeBron played Steph Curry.
Right. But then the primetime game had like a 500% increase. But you know why it had a 500% increase? There was no football on.
Yeah.
So people watched the NBA. Last year, the Ravens played the 49ers on Christmas Day in the primetime game, and no one cared about the NBA.
Right.
But since there was no football, at the Christmas parties, people were putting that game on in the background. It's just like people weren't thinking about that when they were talking about how much the NBA grew on Christmas Day this year. But at the end of the day, that's not what matters. What matters is on a day-to-day perspective. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. All right. Now we can talk about the NBA. I think the biggest news from this past week, especially considering the Western Conference, is the Mike Brown firing. Mike Brown won Coach of the Year a year and a half ago. And he was the head coach of the Sacramento Kings. He was asked to, he was obviously fired by the team. They're sitting at 13-19 in the West. They're the 12 seed right now. Obviously, this is not the season that you were expecting if you were a Sacramento Kings fan. And Jack and I had texted back and forth a little bit about this team overall and how it just hasn't clicked. And I honestly think that, Jack, when we were talking about it, you said that something along the lines of the front office is to blame, not necessarily the head coach. I just want to hear you flesh that out a little bit more if you could.
Well, I mean, I think you have to consider the success and the landscape of the Western Conference at the time when Mike Brown won Coach of the Year, which was they went on a crazy run.
Yep.
The Western Conference wasn't really nearly as good as it is right now, and they had a much more balanced offense in terms of they had a clear pick and roll game that they got into almost every possession, and then they surrounded themselves with shooters and rebounders. Guys like Harrison Barnes was a huge loss for them, right?
Right.
And seasons that, like regression seasons from guys like Keegan Murray and Kevin Huerter, I think is a huge one. Definitely hurt them. But I think that making the move for DeMar DeRozan was not the one that you needed in order to make them a better team. It just kind of threw off the homeostasis of their offense.
Yeah.
And just like the overall balance, which made no sense, right? So I think that you're penalizing a notoriously good head coach in the NBA,
right?
Who another team will scoop up and be successful with.
He will be on a staff by the end of the season.
In order and due to the front office, I mean, obviously now their 3-point shooting percentage goes down from where it was last year, probably closer to 39% to 34%.
Right.
The field goal percent's 57%. I mean, I just don't think that you have a really balanced offense, and that's where all their struggles come from.
Yeah, I agree. Overarchingly, I think that getting a guy like DeMar DeRozan probably makes a team who has a very good system that can build around him.
He's never been a great piece on a good team.
Aside from his Raptors days when he was,
But that was his team. He wasn't
correct.
A piece in that team. That was his team.
I don't think he's a secondary or a tertiary scorer, especially on a team that has been so built on the idea of spacing. You know what I mean? You have to space around De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. Both of those guys are fine 3-point shooters, league average.
And they are deadly together.
It's not what they like to do, though. You know what I mean? They're not looking to pick and pop. That's not what their game is. You know what I mean? Domantas Sabonis is a post-up big, and De'Aaron Fox is a slasher. So
Correct.
If you throw another guy who completely operates in the mid-range and DeMar DeRozan into that offense, your floor spacing is screwed. There's no one that you can do anything with. Obviously, in 2022-23, when the Kings were that 3 seed, and obviously they ran into a 6-seeded Warriors team that was underseeded and really good. And obviously the playoff experience just kind of took over in those 7 games. But like, you surrounded those guys, De'Aaron Fox, with a guy like Malik Monk, who is a pure scorer, can do anything on the basketball court. But first and foremost, he wants to shoot threes at a high volume. Keegan Murray, same thing. Kevin Huerter, same thing, right? You surrounded your guys with guys who complemented that. I think the DeMar DeRozan trade, I don't even know what they gave up. I don't remember. That, like, whatever it was either too much, or wait, did they sign? I don't know if they signed him or trade him. Either way,
free agency.
It just wasn't the right move. You know what I mean? Like, I understand the idea of getting a big box office name into your team, because I do think DeMar DeRozan, he probably has like 5 or 6 All-Star game appearances. Like, he is a guy who you hear the name and you're like, oh, that's a good basketball player. You know what I mean? But you did that without thinking about how that was going to affect the whole system that you run. And in doing so, like, the numbers of Domantas Sabonis are down from last year. De'Aaron Fox's numbers are down from last year. Keegan Murray is having a third-year slump instead of a sophomore slump. Kevin Huerter is going to be traded at the deadline because he hasn't done anything for them right now shooting the ball. You know, Keon Ellis isn't the same player. You got rid of Davion Mitchell. Like, you lost a lot of your identity from that team 2 years ago. And I don't think any of that is really Mike Brown's fault.
Right. So that was my point exactly. And in doing so, you got rid of, I mean, this team is realistically 5 guys deep. You got rid of Harrison Barnes, who was arguably the pinnacle of your defense. And now you can't afford to have anyone come off your bench and be even like a mildly dependable backup.
Yeah, they got Trey Lyles playing 23 minutes a game.
Exactly. So you're a team that's 5 guys deep, and 3 of which operate for the most part inside the arc.
Right.
And that's not something that coaching can fix, which is why I think that it's, again, just like the complete wrong decision to get rid of Mike Brown, someone who I thought would be in Sacramento for a long time.
I agree. I also think that, like, from a franchise perspective, Mike Brown is a guy who brought your team from complete obscurity back to the playoffs.
And they built a legitimate culture with their fan base. Something that they enjoy winning around.
Correct. And I think it's ridiculous that you would throw that away on the whim of the thought that you could get another coach in there that could do relatively the same job as him. I just don't see it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's come back home for a second.
Okay.
The Boston Celtics are now 4.5 games behind the Cavs and only 1 game ahead of the New York Knicks, who are absolutely on fire right now, having dropped 3 out of their last 4.
10. Yeah, 5 of their last 10 too. They're 5-5 in their last 10.
They're 5 out of their last 7 games they've lost.
Yep.
And it's to teams that they shouldn't be losing to. I mean, the Pacers, they've lost to twice this season. The 76ers on Christmas Day was a horrible loss. The Magic the night before, horrible loss. The Chicago Bulls, you lost to the Chicago Bulls. How can you call yourself the best team in the NBA and lose to the Chicago Bulls? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yep.
Right? So is it time for there to be legitimate concern in Boston, or are they just going through a rough patch?
I think that concern is the wrong word. You know what I mean? I won't be concerned about Boston until they lose a playoff series. I still think they're the best team in the NBA. I still think they have the best roster construction in the NBA. And I don't think that anybody's really figured them out yet. I still don't think there's a team that can beat them in 7. That being said, the conversation about the Celtics, especially between me, you, and George when we had our preseason our preseason discussion, was about them solidifying themselves as one of the greatest teams in NBA history. Regardless of if that was a 70-win season, a 65-win season, a 40-0 home season, something, right? Something that would show you that this team is on par with some of the greats. And we're saying this while they're sitting at 23-9, which is nothing to laugh at. But I just think that, like, from a fan perspective and from somebody who heard all the hype and the noise about how Jason Tatum was going to come back this season and how Jaylen Brown was going to have a revenge season and how all these guys were going to be playing, like, you kind of expected more from them. Obviously, I don't think anybody really predicted the Cavs to be nearly as good as they are. They look on fire, and they're a team that just has not slowed down over the past few weeks. And I could see us having a type of situation that was kind of similar to the Celtics back in 2018 when they won the Eastern Conference and then kind of just got smacked by the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, they
They
went
were
to
lost
7
in
games.
seven. Yeah, they lost in
They
seven.
get
So I mean,
smacked.
obviously it wasn't like right. But like I could see you having a reverse type of situation there. But like with teams gaining momentum, especially the Knicks and the Magic, who have looked really good, and the Bucks, who have really bounced back well, despite the fact that people aren't giving them a ton of credit for that. I am a little bit concerned. You know what I mean? I just think that like overall, I expected the Celtics team to be something that they aren't. Maybe I expected them to be completely dominant, and I just don't see them, having the juice to be able to do that right now. And maybe that's a regular season thing, and hopefully it doesn't continue into the playoffs. And maybe that's some of the pieces that are getting too many minutes. Like, I mean, you are resting guys like Kristaps and stuff like that. So like you haven't seen this whole roster on the floor in a while. But something just isn't really clicking right now for the Celtics. And I said it earlier in the season. I want them to rattle off like 10 straight wins. Show me something that they're just like, they are the best team in the NBA still, because I just don't see it.
I mean, I think that this may be the low point of their season, and so if we're gonna spin zone this into something good, I think that Joe Mazzulla's thrilled that they're losing games right now because it gives them something to be like, yeah, we fought back this season. Like we just kept fighting when we were bad, right. And it proves to all these Celtics players that they're not immortal, right? So I think that sort of period of dominance is still coming for us, and our roster's full of guys who don't kind of get in rhythm until after the All-Star break, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to be one of those all-time great teams, you can't afford to do that. And so I think that they are suffering, just like kind of the rest of the NBA community is, from this period of nothingness.
Yeah.
And that's something that they have to do a better job with if they are going to. I mean, at this point, 4.5 games back from the top spot is far. That's not close to being number one.
Yeah,
they have serious work to do. And I don't think that their schedule is honestly super easy coming up. Yep. So I'm certainly interested to see what their next couple games look like, coming off a bad loss against the Pacers yesterday. So I think it's just kind of a sit back and watch kind of conversation. But I mean, the real question is, are they still the favorites in the NBA?
And I think that until you see them lose in a 4-game series or a 7-game series, I think the answer is yes.
All right.
I just don't think there's a team that can beat this team in 7 games.
Dude, our next 5 games, we play the Raptors tomorrow, whatever. Timberwolves, Rockets, Thunder, Nuggets, West Coast trip.
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Those are big games.
Big games.
Those are big games.
For both teams.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Everyone calls the NBA soft. Everyone says that there's too much foul baiting. No one gets physical anymore. It's a 3-point shooting game. Well, guess what? NBA fights are back.
Hell yeah.
And I'm here for it.
Yeah, I am too.
You
need something about ratings. Ratings are down. Bring this shit back.
Bring fighting back. Watching Amen Thompson take Tyler Herro to the floor the other day was awesome.
Tyler Herro just absolutely flame him in the press. It was also pretty funny.
We need more of that.
Najee Marshall. If Najee Marshall connected, like that's a whole different NBA right there. You know,
Najee Marshall going into his Instagram comments and telling every guy who told him that it was a bad punch to fight him in real life. Pretty awesome.
That's fucking cool.
Pretty awesome.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. But yeah, I mean, obviously this grit and grind part of the NBA is something that I miss. I think the casual fan misses when, you were able to trash talk like crazy and do all that type of stuff when in reality you never really could do anything legally like that.
Right. Yeah.
But I do think that the return of the rivalry is awesome. You now have a rivalry between the Mavs and the Suns that has some deep-rooted hate since like the 2021 season. I love that.
Well, Luka is Devin Booker's father.
Correct. And I that's awesome. You know what I mean?
It's
and
awesome.
I love when there's something like that to get excited for and watch basketball on. And every once in a while when there's a scuffle, like you want to see some fireworks. And that's regardless of any sport. You know what I mean? Like in baseball, when I think about this one clip where this pitcher, I don't remember his name. He was on like the Cincinnati Reds. He like throws the glove down and like charges at the other team's dugout.
Amir Garrett was his name.
Is that what it is? All right.
Yeah, and he's just gonna fight the whole team by himself.
Like that's awesome. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I think we need a little bit more of that, and especially when the tempers flare, like let the boys go. Let the boys go.
I agree, and I was having this conversation with a family member the other day. They were like, "Oh, I love it when they do the handshakes." I was like, "Yeah, I mean, it's cool and all, but having them all be friends kind of sucks." Like,
Yeah.
I want to hate the team that we're playing, and I want
Right.
them to hate us.
Right.
It just makes the game so much better. And also watching the guys on the floor, knowing that they hate each other, is awesome.
Yeah.
Like when Ray Allen went to Miami, and in that first series when Miami was playing Boston, we hated each other, and we still hate each other because of it. And that's what the league needs more of, especially if, I mean, you have star players in small markets right now. Mm-hmm. And if you are going to have them be superstars, they need to have rivalry along with it.
Right.
And that's something we've been missing since Cavs Warriors.
I agree. And I'm a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of that being back. The final thing that I just wanted to go over was a team that like is getting no media coverage and no press, and that's totally okay considering the fact that they're 5-27 right now. The New Orleans Pelicans are just simply too talented to be this bad. I don't see a single player on this team that couldn't be traded for something of value. And I don't really understand why, A, they're so bad, and 2, they're just deciding to do absolutely nothing to just blow this up and rebuild.
I mean, they do not have a winning personnel. With that being said, every one of their top 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys could 9. Oh my God. All their top 10 guys. Their top 10 guys could go be pieces on legitimate championship teams. Like I don't think that there's a single team in the NBA that does not want Trey Murphy on their roster right now.
The more you look at it, or Herb Jones. Like
Herb Jones, one of the best wing defenders in the league.
The more you look at this team, the more you're like, what happened? Like, what is going on?
Like, yeah, like where's it going wrong?
Move the team. You have to do something. Like, figure it out.
I don't know what's wrong. They have a great roster, and it's not even that like. If they were mediocre, I'd be like, all right, whatever, tough conference. They're 5-27.
Yeah.
Their whole team is very, very talented, especially getting DeJounte Murray back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a really, really interesting situation. I think you'll see all of these guys probably move on at some point, Brandon Ingram being the first one to probably leave. Will the Zion Williamson experiment continue? I don't know. He's honestly one of the, one of those players that you can look at and be like, he's probably one of the premier busts of the NBA, despite the fact that he has been so good when healthy.
Every time he's on the floor, he's so good.
So I think that there's a lot to talk about with the Pelicans that probably will be discussed later on in the season when these trades start going through. Because I don't think, anybody wants to play there. Like, Dyson Daniels keeps saying it over and over again while he's on the Hawks, which is not really a team that's fantastic or like a huge media market. He's like, thank God I'm not in New Orleans. You know what I mean? So there's
who doesn't want to play in front of 14 fans at the Smoothie King Center? They're horrible. But moving them isn't necessarily the solution because they already tried that twice and it didn't work either time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just wanted to talk about them really quickly because like you said, like there are considerable 8 pieces on this team that I think could be playing and contributing to really good championship winning teams.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's kick it back to the NFL right now. Okay. Normally we do picks where we do like 3 best bet spread picks and then we do a game of the week and a not game of the week. But since it's week 18 and no one's going to be playing their starters, Alex and I are literally just going to throw not game of the weeks back at each other and then make picks on the 2 games of the week.
Okay. All right. Give me your first one. I'm letting you start this one off.
You let me start this one off.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to throw at you Panthers Falcons.
Yeah. Bad game. Is there a way that the Falcons can still make the playoffs?
No.
Okay. Great. So yes, I agree with you. I think the obvious one comes on Saturday at 4:30, a game that no one will be watching. Give me the Cleveland Browns.
Whoa. You got to make your pick.
Wait, on the game that you just said?
Yeah, Panthers Falcons.
I think the Falcons win. No, I think the Panthers win. What? No, the Panthers are winning this game.
Sure.
Okay. Yep. All right, I'm going to give you one here. Give me a pick here on Cleveland Baltimore.
I think the only reason that this shouldn't be included is in the not game of the week category is that the Ravens have to win in order to in order to tie up the AFC North. So I think they're actually going to be playing their starters this week.
They're going to win by 1,000.
So I think the Ravens are going to win by 10, possibly 10,000.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, going down the list. I'm literally just like reading down the list of games.
There's so
Commanders Cowboys, which I might be at in Dallas.
Yeah.
Commanders just locked up their playoff spot. The complete NFC is almost set. Cowboys have nothing to play for. Commanders have nothing to start their good players for. Who wins?
I think the Cowboys win.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Cooper
this
Rush
Commanders team, without Jaden Daniels is just going to be really hard to watch.
Who's the Commanders' backup?
I have no idea. I don't know. Do you want me to look it up?
Oh, this changes things. Marcus Mariota.
Real? Oh, I did know that. Never mind. Yeah. All right. I'm still taking the Cowboys.
Changes nothing.
But that is interesting. Give me a pick here on New Orleans, Tampa Bay.
I think Tampa Bay plays a lot of their starters in order to get to 10 wins. And Baker's hot right now, so I think Tampa Bay.
All right.
All right, your next one. Bears Packers.
Oh, that's a bad one. Despite the fact that this is a rivalry game, obviously the Packers are going to bench their starters. They're at home. I still think they win this game. I think the Bears will try and lose and get a higher draft pick.
All right.
In the same kind of idea, give me a pick here on Bills Patriots.
As an optimistic Patriots fan, I'm going to say the Patriots lose and we lock up that number one pick. Because I know that Gerard Mayo is not going to bench Drake May, even though he's like low-key hurt right now. I know that he's going to play him because he wants the reps, and I know that we're capable of putting up a pretty solid number against backup defensive players.
Yep.
So I'm going to be sweating my ass off hoping that we lose this game, which I've never said before.
I know, seriously.
One of the worst games I've ever had to ask someone for a pick on. Jaguars Colts.
Oh, God. The Mac Jones Bowl, take however many.
Mac Jones versus Joe Flacco in the
flesh. His first down celebration? I just sent you this, I think, the other day. He went and everyone was like, yo, what is he doing?
What?
I think the Colts win. I think they try and win. I think Flacco just goes for 1,000. And yeah, the Panthers the Jaguars have some serious things to consider.
Everyone always talks about the stock market being a safe money-making venture. If you want to make money, find a game where Joe Flacco's filling in for Anthony Richardson, refinance your home, put it on Flacco over 0.5 interceptions, and pay off all your debt. I think it hit the first 2 minutes of the game last week.
He's another one of those guys that just slings the ball anywhere. It could go anywhere at any given time.
I know a Giants defender out there somewhere. All right, your turn.
All right, give me a pick here on Giants Eagles.
I think Saquon goes for the rushing record. I think the Eagles will roll them.
Okay, on the subject, do you think this rushing record has an asterisk?
I think that now, because the standard is 18 or 17 games, that you put other rushing records with an asterisk.
Okay.
So I think that if you have Saquon 1, then you put Dickerson at 2 with an asterisk that says 14 or 16 games only, or however many you played, right?
Or do you just say
just because of OJ rushed for 2,000, and if you look at his number, it has an asterisk next to it that says 14 game season.
Okay.
I think you do something similar.
All right. That's a good call. Give me a pick on that game, though. All right. You think the Eagles win?
Yeah, I think the Eagles win. All right, one more each.
Okay.
All right, Texans have locked up their spot in the AFC South. Who do you have between them and the Titans?
There are two more obvious ones down here. I think the Texans win this one as well, trying to get to 10 games, whatever those bonuses are, and then immediately bench everybody after they, go out and dominate in the first half. The two other games I'm going to hit you with a rapid fire here. Give me a pick for Chargers Raiders.
Give me the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they shoot themselves in the foot draft position-wise.
All right. And give me a pick for 49ers Cardinals.
I don't want to do that. I'm going to give you the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals have had nothing to play for a little while now, so I think they're gonna win that one. I actually think that we have 3 games of the week that we have to make picks on, and they're the 3 ones that have playoff implications. First one being on Saturday, Bengals Steelers.
Give me the Bengals.
I'm gonna ride. Get it done. I'm gonna ride that. I think the Bengals win. I think they're one of the hotter teams in the NFL right now, and everyone besides the Kansas City Chiefs wants them in the playoffs. So
every fan wants them in the playoffs. Yes.
Yeah. And possibly every NFL front office exec, every commissioner.
Maybe.
There's a script. Chiefs, Broncos.
Broncos win this one as well. I do not think that the Bengals are going to get in, and I think the Chiefs bench pretty much everyone.
I think that the Chiefs cannot bench. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to say Chiefs just because I want them to I want the Bengals to get in the playoffs, and that can't happen if the Broncos win. So I'm going to go Chiefs because I can't say that I want the Chiefs to win, but I want the Broncos to lose.
Good way to work around that. Good, good talk.
All right, and this is the real game of the week.
This is the game of the week.
This is possibly the best game of the season.
Correct.
Sunday Night Football, Vikings, Lions to decide who gets the number 1 seed in the NFL.
It's pretty crazy how just unbelievable the NFC North has been this year. There are 3 teams with 11 wins. Like that's crazy to me. I think the Lions win this game. They're at home. That's the only thing that I can really say about that.
I think the Lions win too, but I think I might be pulling for the Vikings in this game. And I think that it's because Sam Darnold's a guy that no one ever thought would be a starting quarterback in the NFL again. He's a guy that people still don't think that the Vikings should pay money, but yet he's got a chance to bring them to 15-2. And I think that if they win the division, the Vikings have to cut their losses with JJ McCarthy and say, "Hey, we have our guy. He's 27. Mm-hmm. You know, he's slinging the football, and he led us to a 15-2 record."
Yeah.
So I think that I want the Vikings to win, but I'm going to say Lions, and I'm going to say that I like Sam Darnold.
You're just coming out with that, huh?
I mean, it's pretty remarkable for a guy who was. It's pretty remarkable for a guy who went from seeing ghosts out there to now leading his team to 15-2, possibly for at least 14-3, which is pretty awesome.
I think you got to pay him. It's whatever.
Also, like Minnesota, their stadium's so fun to watch a football game in.
Yeah, but so is Detroit, dude.
Yeah, but Minnesota is different.
All right.
And the league is better when the Vikings are good. I'll say that.
I agree with that. So that wraps it up.
Yeah, that's a wrap. We'll be back to discuss these wildcard games and how the playoffs shake out after next week. But until then, this has been the Corner Office, and I'm Jack Burnt.
I'm Alex Benders.
Beef.
Corner 3. Hand right there.
Corner 3.
That's some real stuff.